picking up from where I left off and expanding the narrative, not by choice, but unfortunately the circumstance called for just that. I want to begin with the disclaimer that I did my best to keep that stuff under wraps and behind closed doors, but to no avail. And so that is a key part of the foundation of my grievance and my request for recourse and accountability into these folks, because from the outset I've said as much that this is imperative that it be done this way, and that was always discounted, set aside until it wasn't, and by then it was too late. And now, after everything that's already transpired, the same folks are trying to come in and push aside everything that's been put into place as a result of what already happened. So, as I've explained, I'm a former infantryman with 2-2 Infantry of the 1st Infantry Division. I've served with wonderful brothers who later graduated onto other things, but we started off as peacekeepers. Some of them had deployed to combat operations before having come to 2-2 Infantry. Some went to Bosnia, but we went together as peacekeepers for NATO and the United Nations into Kosovo. We went by way of Skopje, Macedonia. Some of the guys from, I think it was 163, they took care of Montenegro and Macedonia. We went from Macedonia to Camp Able Sentry in Kosovo and conducted our mission there. Operation Joint Guardian, Task Force Falcon, 2-2 Infantry was part of that. That's Muchi Baba, Jelani. Things happened up in Mitrovica. Muchi Baba, Outpost Sapper. Yeah, so having participated in the chronology of time of history, having been sent with the duty and the honor of making that change, it stays with you. It resonates. If it don't, it is what it is. But my brothers would later graduate on to Iraq and Afghanistan, and unfortunately we would suffer a huge toll as a result of those operations. And those deaths are relative to this matter. And when I was stationed in Germany, when I left Fort Benning, Georgia, I came home and I'm linked up with who would eventually become my first wife. I met her father one time, and that was on the day that we got married. I had came back from Fort Benning, Georgia, and showed up at their house one day, and there was an there was a circumstance when I showed up. It was chaos. The women were outside. They were frantic. So it could have been an indication of something otherwise, but it is San Diego. And a lot of times people will say one thing, or they may have a light association and want to, be seen as otherwise. And so it's always hard because some people say they're, rolling with this or that, or, and some of them really are. But that could be consequential. And in this circumstance, eventually it would. So I married my wife, caught up with the brothers, and went from Germany to Kosovo. And then when we came back from Kosovo, brought my wife over, and eventually she would go back to the States, and I wouldn't see her again for quite some time after that. Not too much. But while we were deployed in Kosovo, she would stay in Mexico with her friend Lorena and Tony, and I would meet them later on in Mexico, driving around Tijuana. And that put my life on this one certain course that would take me to Amsterdam and Germany. Well, take me back to Amsterdam and Germany, and then eventually into Texas, and then I would come home. In between that time, my first wife's father, as I said, was kidnapped from his home in San Carlos, California. He was taken elsewhere. He was, I guess, tortured or bruised up, beat up, whatever they did to him, and they murdered him, and they threw his body on the freeway. So whatever he was doing was his choices and his decisions. However, he had, I think, 2 sons, 2 daughters, grandkids and everything, and a wife. And his decisions would later on impact their lives, so much so that they had to get up and leave San Diego and move to the other side of the country for their own comfort. Let's call it that. We'll call it comfort. And I expressed before the instance that took place. My wife, she worked. We weren't married at that time, but this was after. She was working in downtown San Diego, I think at the federal court as a translator. And during one of the proceedings, somebody spotted her, and they followed her over to the cheesecake factory and were like, "Hey, ain't you such and such?" And she's like, "Nah." "No, yeah, you are. Yeah, we know who you are." And she had nothing to do with any of that. Neither did the wife or other people. Some people may know or have suspicions or whatever, but they weren't actively involved in whatever their father was involved in. He owned a Cuban restaurant in San Diego. But when it comes to like cartel people, that's not always going to mean for nothing. Sometimes they will intentionally target anybody and everybody, at least in that circumstance. So that was their concern. They had already killed her father, so she moved out of San Diego, and she lives a happy life, and the family lives a happy life on the other side of the country. But I understand this is Napa, and we do have a community here that will understand this more than maybe people who are from here and not from elsewhere. But then we also have a community of people who were raised here but have family from there and maybe know a little bit more about how it operates in Mexico. So within the country of Mexico, there's different territories, and those territories are often overseen, for the most part, by different cartels. Some of them are rivals, some of them are okay. Some cartels have control of what's called the frontera, which is the border area. Those are the two doors. So you could have all the this or whatever going on down here, but whoever controls the door to America has a lot of, power and influence. So the people that control one of those doors would be this group. And so the groups don't get along. There's rival faction. Like I said, there's the Arianos, there's the Sinaloa cartel, there's the CZNG, the new group Jalisco. There's different groups, right? And I mean, there was the Zetas, there's just all kinds of stuff. I was actually in Mexico when Mexico City sent the Pepos from Mexico City, the soldiers, to take away the guns from the police of Mexico and give them slingshots, because the police in Tijuana could not be trusted. They knew that they were carrying out a lot of these murders on behalf of the cartel people. So when you're down there, I don't care what people will say. It's like, oh no, it's safe, it's wonderful. Mexico's got a bunch of wonderful people and a bunch of wonderful places. That does not change the danger, none with the slightest. So people can make all these videos they want about like, oh, they say it's this or they say it's that. When the State Department says an area is questionable and maybe not advised to go, then you shouldn't. But some people would be like, oh, I win, and okay, that doesn't take away anything. That doesn't change all the murders that happen here and there, and the sequestering or the kidnappings, whatever, and then people disappear. It's chaos, it's mayhem. And so, as I've mentioned before, now I declare under penalty of perjury that what I say here is true. This has already been decided in the courtroom. All right, so take into consideration my circumstance. I'm not an attorney. I'm just a father fighting to protect my son. Understand that, okay? And I had to go into this courtroom and deal with an attorney that has 16 years experience. I don't have that experience, into an arena which I don't understand. I have tenacity, and I'm not an attorney with 16 years experience. I'm a father that's fighting to protect his son. Now imagine if you were me and you were in my dilemma, and your first wife's father was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered in San Diego by the people that run one of those doors. And then you marry a woman, you have a child with her, and she's taking your child into the area, not just into Mexico, but specifically into the area controlled by the people who intentionally kidnapped and murdered your father, your first wife's father, right? And all that chaos that ensued. Now, keep in mind, as mentioned before, going into this arena this is drunk drivers, alcoholics, like it's already set in stone. Like there's plenty of evidence that's been submitted to show that's a factual statement. That's not my opinion. That's not an attack from me. It's not ad hominem or whatever attack against a person. These are facts, right? That's what they do. Evidence, the preponderance of the evidence, the burden of proof has been met. So keep in mind, so you got your spouse taking your son all the way down to San Diego, working all day and then driving to San Diego 525 miles, then traveling into the area of operations into Mexico where the people control that are still there, that murdered your first wife's father with an individual who's actively engaged in said activity. You don't know who for, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because remember, my first wife's father was dispatched by the people he was working with. So you can either get dispatched by your own people or you can get dispatched by a rival. You know, there's so that look up Ensenada Memorial Day last year. There was a massacre. 14 people died. Of those 14 people, 4 of them were innocent people. There was a man that was shot, his son was shot, and with his last breath of life, he grabbed his son and threw him under a side-by-side to save his son. His son was shot, but he died. 4 innocent people. There's video on YouTube. Type that in. You can see the gunmen just get out and they start spraying, man. They don't care who they hit. They're not like that. So keeping that in mind, you don't want your son in a vehicle with that kind of individual, let alone a dropout debriefer added to boot of that. And then for some reason out there trying to, I don't know, live a life that to reestablish the ego. I don't know what the purpose would be, having gone through everything that this moron has gone through. But you surely don't want somebody that stupid in a car with your son in Mexico in the area of operations controlled by the people that already killed and dispatched your family member. Now, as I've mentioned before, I already went to the FBI. I already went to the federal government. I went to the federal building over there. I reached out in writing. I came to Napa and I begged them. And I mean beg in tears, pleading, begging. Protect my son. Okay? So it got so bad. I begged them. I tried to keep this under wraps. And there's going to be people, there's some people that make silly ass comments and everything. If you've never gone and faced off with murderers and killers, your opinion probably means less than nothing, because you're going to want to elevate yourself to some level of warrior or valor or courage. Maybe you ain't done it yet. There's people out there that have. But now imagine traveling, you as an American, going into another country and putting in work, right? On the people that dispatched other people's family members on behalf of the victims, right? Imagine you, American, right? All that talk, all that tough guy shit, go into Mexico and go do what you have to go do. Do your best to go and find justice on behalf of the families who cannot get that. Would you? Could you? Now, marinate and process. So I went to the feds and I've admitted what I've done. When I went into Mexico, what I've done on behalf of the families who couldn't get justice, the actions that I took. That's how desperate I had to get to protect my son. Because think about that now. So now you got an individual taking your child down into Mexico, into the area of operations, and into the controlled area of the people that already dispatched your family member with an idiot that's working with somebody that you don't know. But you, in that area of operations, you have went down there and you have put in work on behalf of the victims' families. And I think they're the real victims, because some people make bad choices and other people suffer. The real victims are the people left behind. The ones who go from having one parent or two parents to having one, the suffering, the struggle, the kids that don't have their parents at their graduations and everything because their parents are now dead. I already cited the 2 little girls, the 5-year-old girls that are dead. My friend Fernando, that he was in a car accident, he died, they sued his spouse for everything she has. So when I'm talking about loss of life here, I'm not just talking about people that were murdered. There's alcoholics that drank themselves to death. My foster mom, those 2 little 5-year-old girls that died in San Diego. And to protect my son, I had to go and admit to the actions, the operations, the actions on behalf of the families of the victims. The families are the true victims, on behalf of the families who could get no justice. And I begged Napa County to do something, and they failed me. So I had to do what I had to do. And they keep trying to make that out to be some act of violence when I've been peaceful, non-violent from the beginning, exercising constitutionally protected right. It's no longer peaceful because this is a legal battle. That's why they call it a legal battle. It's a war. And I cited as much that this would be a war, but it would be a war of information. I begged them to try to deal with this differently, and they refused to do so. People second-guessed the reality. Their excuses as to why means absolutely nothing. What matters is that it was true, and the danger was real, and they sat on their hands. And I just found out the other night that Child Welfare Services has done this before, and it cost a child their life. I didn't know about that, but now I know, but I'll cite that. But so everybody cracking their little jokes and all that stuff, and you think it's funny, well, how low do your nuts hang to the ground for you to go into Mexico and go put in work on against murderers and killers on behalf of the families, the true victims? So that's my circumstance. So laugh, crack all the fucking jokes you want to do. I don't care, it don't mean nothing. Because when a coward's talking to you and they're trying to talk on a soapbox, it's like, whatever, you know. But I declare under penalty of perjury what I say is true. So I had to go to the feds and tell them what I've done as a begging to fucking protect my son. And I'll continue to do so. And now what do I got to do but go back in this courtroom with no attorney? I work 7 days a week. I spend thousands of dollars and hours and hours and hours of my time to try to protect my son. And Honorable Victoria Wood, she did the right thing. But now these people are trying to walk it back with the helps of these agencies. And I went to San Francisco and asked that, please watch my back on this, because they're going to try to retaliate, because they don't want people to know the extent of this narrative and their inactions and what would have been the consequence and what has been the consequence. So laugh, crack jokes all you want. I don't care. The people who know what it is, that's who my message is for. Because now I'm not going to let it just be here in Napa County anymore. I can't trust Napa County to do the right thing. So we're going to take it outside of Napa County to the federal level. That's what my post is about.